everyone knows Cleopatra VII, the famous one.
She gets all the attention.
But the queens who came before her, like Cleopatra I, they were hugely important too, often in ways people don't realize.
Absolutely foundational, in fact.
So our mission today, really, is to shed some light on Cleopatra I and the impact she had. Where should we start? Her childhood.
I think that's perfect. Antioch, around 204 BCE. You have to picture it. It's this vibrant, incredibly diverse city. A real powerhouse of the Seleucid Empire.
The sources paint quite a picture, don't they? The sounds, the smells, the different languages.
Yeah. Yes, spices, incense, Greek, Aramaic, Persian. And the royal palace, immense. This was her world.
Born into serious privilege, then. A princess in a major empire. And her parents sound like quite the contrast.
They really do. Her father, Antiochus III the Great, they called him this ambitious warrior king, always expanding, always campaigning.
Known for pushing the empire's borders way out east.
Exactly. But then her mother, Leotis III, she seems to have been more about political maneuvering. Very astute.
There's that quote attributed to her. A queen does not shout. She whispers and the world listens.
Which really tells you something about her style, doesn't it? Subtle influence working behind the scenes.
Was it typical, as the sources say? Or was Leotis particularly good at that kind of court politics?
Well, the sources definitely frame her as particularly skilled. It suggests she knew that in that kind of environment, shouting gets you noticed, but maybe whispering gets you results.
And Cleopatra was watching all this as a kid, the rivalries, the plotting.
Seems like it. There's mention of siblings, Antiochus, Seleucus, Artes, and this undercurrent of competition. Even that incident by the fountain.
Right, a seemingly small thing, but it shows she was already aware of the games people played.
It suggests she was learning the rules early on just by observing. And her formal education sounds incredible.
Oh, absolutely. Tutors from Athens, Babylon, a huge library. Homer, Euclid, Alexander the Great's campaigns.
It's the kind of education that shapes a ruler. And one tutor, Lysimachus, really stands out in the material.
Her favorite, apparently.
Eh?
Taught her rhetoric, strategy.
Words are weapons. That was his mantra, it seems.
And that story about the trapped army, where she suggests lighting fires on the hills as a deception.
Yeah. Brilliant, right. Shows that strategic mind working even then.
But what's interesting is Lysimachus' reaction. He praises her boldness.
But also cautions her about foresight, like, great idea, but think 3 steps ahead.
That balance, ambition, but calculated ambition. And you see her watching her parents applying these lessons almost.
Seems so. Observing her father's very dominant style at banquets, but also her mother's quieter way of guiding things, like with the Bactrian envoy.
So she's getting this amazing intellectual grounding, but also practical lessons empowered just by being there?
Exactly. She wasn't just reading scrolls, she was analyzing people, situations, the whole dynamic.
Even with her brothers, right? The Scroll Princess nickname.
Yeah, and Seleucus hiding her astronomy text. Typical sibling stuff maybe, but in a royal court, it all has layers. And she apparently gave as good as she got.
She learned to hold her own.
Yeah.
And then that moment, age 11, overhearing talk of a marriage alliance.
My daughter to their king, Egypt.
Wow, that must have hit hard. Suddenly your future is a political chip.
A stark reminder of what it meant to be a princess then, and her reported reaction, going up to the roof, making that vow.
I will not be a shadow. I will shine.
It's powerful, shows this incredible determination, even so young, really sets the stage, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. For that next big step, the journey to Egypt, she's 19, leaving everything she knows.
Yeah, transforming from a Seleucid princess to potentially a Ptolemaic queen, facing a totally unknown future. That takes guts.
And the journey itself sounds like a bit of an ordeal based on the sources.
It really does. The ship, the Star of Antioch, the Mediterranean, it's presented as more than just travel. It's a transition, a test.
You mentioned Captain Phaedrus and his warning.
Right. The sea is a fickle goddess. She smiles, then bites. A bit of foreshadowing, perhaps?
Seems like it. And she's using her astronomy lessons to help navigate.
Apparently so. Shows that education wasn't just theoretical, practical skills.
Okay, so she's capable, resourceful, but then the political angle creeps in with the Ptolemaic envoy, Callias.
Yes, Callias. He comes aboard, and it's all subtle questions trying to gauge her, maybe probe for weaknesses.
So even on the ship, the political game is on. She has to be wary.
Constantly. No time to relax, and then bam, the storm.
Sounds terrifying. Ship tossed around, crew losing it.
But Cleopatra steps up, rallies them. Men of Antioch, The gods test us.
That's where Phaedrus supposedly notes her general's heart.
Exactly. She's not just a passenger. She's showing leadership under fire, earning respect.
A crucial moment. And then, as if that wasn't enough.
Pirates.
Seriously. Pirates, too.
Seems so. Another test. And again, she refuses to hide below deck.
Inspires the crew again. For Antioch. For Egypt. Hold fast.
Yeah. It really paints a picture of someone with extraordinary courage and presence.
You could almost see these trials at sea as, like, preparation for the political storms waiting in Alexandria.
That's a great way to put it. And during the voyage, she also encounters Nefertari, the Egyptian priestess.
Ah, yes. Teaching her about Egyptian gods. Isis in particular.
And planting that idea. In Egypt, queens are her daughters.
That feels significant. Linking queenship to this powerful Egyptian goddess.
Immensely significant. It gives Cleopatra a potential path to connect with her new subjects, a source of legitimacy.
Even amidst all this drama storms, pirates, dwindling food, suspicion about Callias.
Right. She's having to watch him, manage resources, learn about a new culture, and survive the Mediterranean.
It's intense. And then finally, Alexandria.
The lighthouse, the harbor, the sheer scale of the city, and crowds welcoming her.
Chanting Cleopatra, Isis reborn.
Imagine that arrival, overwhelming, and then her first meeting with the king. Ptolemy V. Just a boy, really.
And she steps into this labyrinth of ambition, as one source calls it.
Or a viper's nest.
Yeah, the descriptions of the Ptolemaic court are pretty stark. Beautiful on the outside, but dangerous underneath.
Totally different from Antioch, probably. And Ptolemy V wasn't really in charge yet, was he?
Not fully. He had these powerful advisors, Sosibius and Agathocles, kind of running the show. And they were deeply suspicious of her.
The outsider. The Seleucid princess, plus all the other factions.
Exactly. Egyptian priests, Greek merchants, old noble families, everyone jostling for influence, a real minefield.
So how does she even start? How do you navigate that?
Well, initially it seems she was very cautious, observing, listening.
Like at that first banquet, when Sosibius is grilling her. Right. And she gives that careful answer. Egypt's strength lies in its people, not its walls. Diplomatic, non-committal.
Smart. But she faced prejudice too, right? The gender.
Oh, definitely. So Sosibius's comment, "War is a man's game, my queen," pretty much sums it up. Dismissive.
But that didn't stop her. She found ways to show her worth.
Seems so, like at the military review, talking strategy with General Menelaus.
Suggesting improvements to coastal defenses?
Yeah. Using her knowledge, showing she understood military matters, it was a way of saying, don't underestimate me.
A clever move. Proving her intellect in their domain.
And her relationship with Ptolemy himself sounds complicated.
Volatile. Needs careful handling.
Very much so, according to the sources. Like the incident with the Roman tribute, she had to manage his temper, but also steer him toward a sensible decision.
So she's playing multiple games at once, court politics, managing the king, proving her own value.
And building alliances, crucially, not just with the Greek elite.
Reaching out to the Egyptian population, that seems key.
Incredibly astute, especially connecting with the priesthood of Isis. Her meeting with Kaimwaset, the high priestess, that was vital.
And proposing a big new temple for Isis.
Yes. This wasn't just about piety, though maybe that was part of it. It was deeply political.
How so? Why was aligning with Isis such a big deal?
Well, think about it. The Ptolemies were Greek rulers in Egypt. There was always underlying tension with the native Egyptian population.
Right.
By championing Isis, a major Egyptian goddess, Cleopatra could bridge that gap, win over the powerful priesthood, appeal directly to the Egyptian people.
Gaining a base of support that previous rulers maybe didn't have.
Exactly. It broadened her power beyond just the palace factions. It was a way to root herself in Egypt culturally and politically. A really smart long-term strategy.
And she courted the merchants too. Understood the economic side.
Seems that way. Meeting with figures like Nicias, showing she understood trade, Alexandria's commercial power, building connections there too.
But the Isis connection, that was the boldest move, as the source puts it.
Absolutely. Commissioning statues, linking her with Isis, funding festivals. It was a very public, very deliberate campaign.
To create this image of herself as, well, divinely endorsed, connected to Egypt's heart.
Which leads right into this idea of her crafting a divine legacy. That temple of Isis becomes the ultimate symbol.
More than just a building, a statement.
A huge statement. And there's that story of her dream where Isis speaks to her.
You are my vessel, bind my people. Whether literal or symbolic, it reinforces the connection.
Right. It feeds the narrative. But the underlying political goals are pretty clear.
Countering rivals like Sosibius, winning over the priests, claiming that divine legitimacy.
All of it. And the big festival for Isis described in the sources that sounds like a masterstroke of propaganda almost.
Blending Egyptian and Greek traditions.
Yes, a real spectacle.
Yeah.
And Cleopatra herself, right at the center of the procession.
So the crowd chanting, "Isis, mother of all, Cleopatra, her daughter."
I mean, talk about successful branding. She effectively became Isis in the public eye for many.
And this wasn't just a one-off. She kept cultivating that relationship with the priesthood.
Definitely. The temple project was ongoing. It was a strategic partnership. She gave them resources and prominence. They gave her legitimacy and popular support.
Win-win.
And the temple itself, the artwork mixing Greek and Egyptian styles, reinforced that message of unity under her rule, blessed by Isis.
Did this have an impact beyond Egypt?
Apparently so. The cult of Isis grew more popular across the Mediterranean. Even her own brother, back in the Seleucid Empire, supposedly dedicated a shrine. Shows her influence spreading.
Wow. But things at court didn't just magically get easy, right? So Sosibius and Agathocles were still around.
Oh, yeah. The plotting and rumors continued. She constantly had to navigate that, counter their moves, protect her position.
It really was a balancing act, building this popular divine image while fighting off threats from within the palace.
It shows incredible skill, faith and strategy, completely intertwined. Isis really did become her shield and her sword, as the source says, her brand, her power base.
But eventually, her time as queen consort and then regent ended. She ended up in exile.
Yes, back in Seleucid territory, in Apamea, after her son, Ptolemy VI, essentially pushed her aside.
That must have been a bitter pill to swallow, from the heights of Alexandria to, well, relative obscurity.
A huge shift. But the sources suggest she didn't just fade away. Her exile wasn't the end of her influence.
How so? What did she do?
Well, she seems to have adopted a new role, still influential, but differently. More reflective, perhaps.
Still devoted to Isis, though.
Absolutely. That connection remained profound, and she became a mentor figure to her nieces, sharing her wisdom, her experiences.
Passing on her knowledge. Like a stateswoman emeritus.
Sort of, and she started writing her memoirs, apparently, trying to shape her own story for the future.
Making sure her version got told. Smart.
And she didn't completely cut ties with Egypt.
No. Secret letters.
Exactly. Correspondence with allies, especially Kaimwaset, the priestess, trying to influence policy, offer advice to her son, Ptolemy VI, even from afar.
Still playing the game, just remotely. Shows her commitment, or maybe her inability to let go entirely.
Probably a bit of both. She clearly still cared deeply about Egypt's direction.
And Kamwaiset visited her in exile.
Yes, bringing news from Egypt. And this is poignant, telling her that the worship of Isis was stronger than ever and that people were dedicating statues to Cleopatra Isis.
Wow. So her legacy, her connection to the goddess, endured even after she was gone from power. That must have meant a lot.
A powerful validation, surely, knowing her work had lasted.
And that moment where she passes on the turquoise amulet.
A symbol of her legacy, passed down. It frames the exile not as failure, but as a different chapter, a testament to her resilience and lasting impact.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. Our deep dive into Cleopatra I. What are the big takeaways?
Well, ambition, definitely. Political smarts, absolutely. Resilience, for sure. But maybe most importantly, the sheer strategic brilliance of her connection with Isis.
It wasn't just faith, it was statecraft.
Precisely. And through that, and her skillful maneuvering, she really did lay the groundwork for the later Ptolemaic queens.
So while Cleopatra VI gets the spotlight, understanding Cleopatra VI is kind of essential to understanding the whole dynasty.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Her story, though less famous, is vital context.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How these less celebrated figures can completely change how we see a period of history.
Absolutely. Which leads to a final thought for you, our listeners.
Go on.
If Cleopatra VI's calculated embrace of Egyptian religion had such a massive political impact, what other, maybe seemingly personal choices by figures throughout history might have had equally profound but perhaps overlooked political consequences?
That's a really interesting question to ponder. What looks personal, but is actually deeply political?
Something to chew on.
Definitely. Well, we hope you'll keep exploring the Ptolemaic queens and the whole fascinating Hellenistic world. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.